Welcome back. Hey, you know what we're doing this time? It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about another trade model. So this video is for the EC 351 International Trade and Finance course. And in this video lecture, lecture 4, we'll be talking about, yeah, you got it, the offshoring of goods and services. So far in our models, we've talked about what forms the basis for trade. So why does a nation export this or import that? And we've sort of taken the goods, the export good or the import good, as sort of a fixed final thing, right? So I make the thing, I make the car, right, or whatever, and I put the car in a boat, I ship it overseas, and they buy it, or in the case of the importer, the reverse. What we're going to ask in this question is, well, what if there are goods and services that aren't finished that I maybe want to export, and then maybe later on in the production stage import them back? In other words, what if international trade looks more like this, that finished goods and services are constructed all over the world and then sold all over the world? Why do I locate my call center in India? Why do I locate my manufacturing facility for the same firm, right, in China? Why do I locate my legal offices in the United States? All for some firm. So why does firm X locate its legal department in the United States? Why does it locate manufacturing in China? And then why does it locate its customer service or whatever in India? Okay, so we're talking about the offshoring of specific aspects of the production process. All right, so let's hop right into it. Okay, the theme for the pictures this time is immigration. So these are all pictures of immigrants to the United States in the past. Okay, so the question here is, what if a foreign firm decides that it's cheaper to produce goods and services within the home country? So, for example, right now I have a Honda car, right? So Honda is a Japanese corporation, but my car was made in Alabama, which is part of the United States, right? So even though the car carries a foreign nameplate, the actual production of that car, the construction of the car, occurred here in the United States. Yet, the main corporate offices are still in Japan. So, of course, some of those vehicles are shipped back to Japan. So you got corporate offices in Japan, production occurring in the United States, and then some of those cars getting shipped back to Japan. So, why would a firm choose to do that? What type of models can we construct that would explain the rationale for that type of organization? Okay. So, of course, this is the reality of global trade today. In fact, it's much more common that production is sort of broken up globally and spread around than it is for it to be in one place. And that's really been the case for some time. Even 20, 30 years ago, most of the radios that were in a Ford car, so an American car, right, were made overseas. And they're usually at that time in the 1980s and 1990s, they were made in Japan. Today, it's not. Now you've got components within the radio. There's no radios anymore, right? There's the entertainment systems. And those components are made all over the globe, let alone the tires and the wheels and the metal for the car and everything else, right? It's made all over. So what we really need to do is we need to be more sophisticated about factors of production, right? So it's not just labor or capital. It's different types of labor and it's different types of capital. It's financial capital versus physical capital. It's high-skilled labor versus low-skilled labor, and so on and so on. There are near infinite divisions within factors of production with which we can conduct analysis, right? Sort of see what's going on. For our purposes here, we're simply going to subdivide the idea once. So, for example, we're going to subdivide labor from high skilled to low skilled, and just kind of see how we can construct a model based upon that idea. And before I go any further and bore you to death too much with all this, I'll tell you that the model we're going to develop here is actually much more practical than what, maybe I shouldn't say that. It's much more obviously practical than any that we've developed before. In fact, on the Canvas page, and you'll see a preview of it here on this, on the Canvas page, I've developed a Excel spreadsheet that's interactive that you can download and play around with. That's actually a working version of this model, right? So you can just take whatever numbers you want to apply, throw them into this model and see the results. And I'm actually going to do that with a couple other models we do for the rest of this term. But this is the first one you'll see. You're actually asked to do something like this on your homework for this section. If you're up for it, I would really like you to try to redesign or to design the model that I built in Excel for that assignment. Of course, the assignment just asks you to work through it on paper. But it's way cooler to be able to build it in such a way, to program it effectively in such a way that it can answer any question, right? Rather than the specific one you're being asked. Okay, so there's some more here on this page. You can read the rest about sort of the rationale of why we're subdividing factors of production. All right, so from here forward, we're going to define W sub L is low skilled workers, right, or low skilled labor. Now, what exactly is a low skilled? There's a lot we can talk about there. We're not going to. We're just going to leave it at that for the moment. If we were writing a paper or we were doing some formal analysis for our business that we're working for, we would certainly want to define those characteristics more carefully. Similarly, we're going to let W sub H be high skilled workers, and then, as we've done before, anything with an asterisk after it is the same but in the foreign country. So WL star is low skilled labor in the foreign country. Okay, so on. We're gonna, just for simplification's purpose, right? It doesn't change anything about our model, but we're gonna say that the prices of those are sort of given, and this is why it's kind of more a practical model, because that's more like how business operates, right? So, what is the price of welders in this country? Okay, it's $10 an hour or whatever. That's sort of more what business looks like, and that's kind of how this model is going to work. We're going to assume that these nations have separate labor markets, so workers in high skill don't shift to low skill and vice versa. And we're also going to assume for the time being that they don't move themselves, right? So the laborers don't move. And we're going to say that different aspects of the value chain, so of the production process, utilize different types of factors. So building upon what we've learned already, if we think about production normally as a single production function, where Q, output, is a function of, say, labor and capital or something like that. Here we're going to say that Q is a function of all these different types of labor and all these different types of capital, and that if we were to isolate that production function to specific subsets of production, so for example, let's say like the production of a tire, right, that would also have a different production function than, say, the production of the wheel for the car, the metal part. Right? The metal part has a different set of inputs, a different set of factors of production utilized when compared to the rubber part, the tire. Okay. We're going to assume, just for this case, right? We don't have to assume this. We can change this assumption, but just to sort of show we are, we're going to assume that the foreign wages are lower in general, but that the relative wage of a low-skilled labor is lower when compared to that of the home country. Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack there. So let's read that again. I'm going to assume that foreign wages are lower in general. So whether it's high-skilled or low-skilled, we're going to assume that foreign wages are lower than they are at home. But that the relative wage of low-skilled labor is lower when compared to the ratio in the home country. So for example, what would be correct for this assumption? Well, if we said the price of low-skilled labor in the home country is $10, and the price of high-skilled labor in the high-skilled labor in the home country is $40. So it's the ratio there. It's 4 to 1, high to low, right? High-skilled labor, $40 an hour, low-skilled, $10 an hour. So the ratio, 4 to 1. High-skilled gets paid 4 times. All right. In the foreign country, maybe we'd say that low-skilled labor gets paid $1 per hour, and high-skilled labor gets paid $10 an hour. Okay, so in other words, the ratio there is 10 to 1. So the ratio is greater in the foreign country, and the low-skilled labor, when compared to high-skilled labor, is even cheaper in relative terms when compared to the home country. Okay, so you got that? So another way of saying, rewind it if you haven't, but another way of saying that, rewind it, slide the bar back to the left. Another way of saying that is that the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled labor is much greater in the foreign country than it is in the home country. Okay. All right, so this is we're just expressing this formally now. So WL when compared, W star L when compared to WL, W, right, H star versus WH, and so on and so forth. So this is just a formal statement of our assumptions that I just talked about on the previous page. When you're doing this sort of work, first of all, for your assignments for me, you should write these out. But just as general practice, you're going to want to write these things out formally for others to follow what you're doing, but even more importantly, frankly, for you to follow what you're doing. Right? Remember what did we do here again? Oh, okay, right. Now, in your assignments, I expect this to be very explicit. If you were doing this for business, it would probably be in a footnote or somewhere in an appendix. You'd write all this math out, but you're gonna want to do it there too. All right. Okay, so the firm will have other things to consider besides these sort of crude costs, right? You've got to consider tariffs. You've got to consider quotas, as well as other policy restrictions that may be placed upon the movement of goods and services. You've got to consider your transportation and communication costs, right? So you may find a country where labor is really cheap in relative terms, and even their productivity is high. So sort of the Ricardian prediction is that they should export, right? But then you find, there's just no roads, and you can't get the product to market, or you can't get the product to port. Well, that's going to shoot it right there. That's going to be the end of that possibility. It doesn't matter how productive your labor is, or how well skilled they are, or how low their wages are. If you don't have the most rudimentary infrastructure in place, then nothing's going to happen there. Tax rates, right, obviously are going to impact this. It's cost of doing business. We're going to treat all these as fixed costs. So let's say that we can sort of, ask our accountants or whatever, what is this, sum it all up for us and give us a number. And so that's how we're going to treat that idea in our model here. Okay. Okay, you can read that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So this is the chart here on the right is lifted from an older version of your text, but it's the same as what's in your text. What we're doing here is we're going to figure out, where it is in the production chain that we should move goods and services. So we're going to say that there is an order of production, and this is the top one there, moving from left to right. We have first research and development. We then have component production, then assembly, and then marketing and sales finally. And that represents the production process from start to finish. And we can rank those 4 activities in terms of how skilled the labor has to be. So from unskilled, the least skilled is the foreign, moving to component production, then marketing and sales, and then R&D being the most skilled aspect of production. And what we're going to see is if there's some way we can split that up sort of get production started in one place and then move it to another place and save money on total production costs. Okay, so it's a pretty straightforward problem. Well, let's leave it there and see how it works. That'd probably be the best thing to do. Okay, so let's throw some numbers at this. So production involves these 4 activities, and we've also can rank those activities, and we're given this data, right? So we're given low-skilled labor in the home country costs $10. Low-skilled labor abroad costs $1. High-skilled labor in the United States costs $25, and high-skilled labor abroad costs $5. So the ratio at home is 2.5 to 1, and the ratio abroad is 5 to 1. So it hits our assumptions, right? Finally, let us say the trade costs can be 25, 30, or 50% of production, right? So this is our fixed cost that we were talking about in the previous slide. So if we add up our tariffs or taxes or hassle of building the road to get this stuff to the port, building the factory, putting in, whatever other infrastructure is necessary, if that comes out to 25% of the total cost, 50%, 30%, whatever, where should we locate production? Okay, so here's our 4 stages. And so what you see here, as well as what you're going to see on the next slide, I've programmed into Excel. And you can download it right on the Canvas site, and you can change these numbers, and I'll make a second short video on that, just me playing around with it and showing you how it works. Essentially this is a simple mathematical problem, right? And so we can actually tell Excel to solve it for us for any given inputs. But if we have hours of labor used, so if we use low-skilled labor abroad, it's going to take 20 hours for assembly, but if we do it at home, it's only going to be 5 hours, indicating what? The productivity of domestic workers is 4 times what it is abroad. Okay, so if we can get 1 widget built in an hour abroad, we can get 4 built at home. If we utilize high-skilled labor for that job, assembly, we find that we can get 4 done in an hour if we put it abroad, and 1 if we do it domestically. So productivity there is 4 times greater locally than it is abroad. So you notice we're accounting for both Ricardian style things, productivity, as well as Heckscher-Ohlin style things, factor allocation. Okay. The other numbers there are the same, right? So for component production, office services, and R&D. And then the ratios there are high to low skilled, right? So basically if we move to high skilled labor, we can get the job done in 1/5 the time, or 20% of the time. If we retain low-skilled labor to get that job done, it's going to take us 5 times as long. But, it's going to cost us different, right? Okay. Okay. So, given our costs, low-skilled labor and high-skilled labor, as well as given our times, right? Remember, our costs are here. Our times are here. Right, so this is our cost to hire labor here. These are our times to get the job done. We can then calculate all this. So where should we locate production? Well, the first 2 lines give us our cost to produce abroad or in the home country for assembly, component production, office services, and R&D. If the next line then is if we import, right, what's it going to cost us if there's an additional 20% on top of that, just in hassle costs, let's call it? Well, 40 plus 20% is $48, right? 32 plus 20% is $38.40, right? So that's where our third line come from. And our fourth, this line here, as well as our fifth line, are similar, right? So we take that number times 30, right? 30%, 1.333, yeah, or no, 30, excuse me. This times 50%, so on. This is very obvious, 40 to 60, 150%, right? Okay, so you got it. So now from all this information, we can see, you know, exactly where we should import, in which we should produce domestically. And again, what I think I'm going to do looking at this again is I'm going to make a separate short video with the interactive spreadsheet where I work through that with you, because it's way easier to see it if I can actually just change the numbers and be like, hey, look what that did, right? And show you the formulas that are written into Excel. But that'll be a more productive use of our time. Suffice it to say that if we have those costs, we have those, you know, times, right? We can calculate all this stuff. And then quickly we can figure out, like, okay, this is how much it costs to produce at home, right? So for sure we should do this one abroad, because even if it got 50% hassle costs, 60 is still less than 75, right? Here too, even if we've got 50% hassle costs, 48 is less than 55. Here, no, we should do this locally, because at 50% hassle cost, that's costs us more than $70. Similarly here, and even here now at 30%, we can see that's more than 260. So what this is showing us is that currently with these costs, right, if we've got 20% difficulty costs, tariffs, taxes, everything else like that, then we should make everything overseas. If we've got 30% kind of difficulty costs of producing overseas, we should do these 3 steps overseas and then bring it into the country and do the R&D here at home. Okay, so maybe we would, you know, we're going to start R&D in the United States, and then once the R&D is done, we're going to hand the rest of production, right? So like the assembly, building of the components, the assembly of the components, as well as like the marketing, sales. We're gonna do that abroad, right? And then here, you know, if we're at this really 50% hassle cost, then, you know, we're gonna bring these offices back here too, right? So we're gonna do R&D locally, and the component production as well as the assembly is gonna occur abroad. We're gonna bring the item back to the United States and do marketing and sales within the home country. All right. Okay. So now let's look at this in the sort of normal, in the framework we're used to in this class, with these PPFs and these indifference curves. So here we have, right, these are the gains from trade associated with offshoring, right? So it's similar to all of our other models, except for we have this across aspects of production rather than across finished goods and services. Combinations of input beyond the PPF, you know, of course, can't be produced, just like before. Okay, so very similar, right? This is the no trade situation, A, where production is at A and consumption is at A. So all production is local, pre-trade condition. Okay. Post-trade condition then looks, you know, more like that. Okay. And so what we've done here is we have lowered the cost of producing the item by offshoring certain aspects of production. Again, going back to here, right? So if we're able to, if we made everything at home, right, you know, maybe it's going to cost us the sum of these 4 things to produce the item, right? So 75 plus 55 plus 70 plus 260. If we're able to shift that overseas completely, and there is 20% trade costs, 20% of our costs to move things back and forth, hassle, so on and so forth, then we can lower our costs to the sum of these 4 items here. Okay, that's a significant savings from this second row here. Okay, come in right here. Okay, so what we have here in this slide is the post-trade situation, where we have a fall in the relative price of components. So we've been able to offshore the component part of production, save costs in there, and then allow us to consume more than we would have been able to do otherwise. Again, because we're lowering relative costs and allowing us to plug that cost savings back into consumption. Similarly here, the reverse fall in the price of research and development and the subsequent changes in price. Again, the red line being, or sorry, the blue line here being the no trade price. The blue line here being the world relative price of components. And then the red line here being the world relative price of components post-trade. Okay. All right. So that's that for this one. I think we'll keep it short right there, and we'll see you in the next video where I go through the little interactive model in the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so be sure to watch that one too. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you there in just a